Many Project Zomboid players never manage to live long enough to experience winter. In fact, from time to time you can see posts on Reddit where people say, "I just saw my first snow." So let me just say that there is a way to experience winter almost at the very beginning of the game, and I don't mean changing the starting date. I mean the Winter is Coming challenge. Today's masterclass is gonna be episode 1 of a mini-series that covers every single in-game challenge. And there was no other way to begin this mini-series than by covering my favorite challenge, the one that I've spent the most time playing, that is Winter is Coming. I'll cover what it is, what are some builds and strategies you can use to, well, basically beat this challenge, and also some ideas on how to make it even more difficult. As if Project Zomboid wasn't difficult enough as a standalone game, Indie Stone did prepare a set of challenges for us. Those challenges are the CDDA, the Last Stand, and the Winter is Coming. And what exactly is the nature of the challenge? Well, you see, it's a game mode in which the temperature will gradually drop below zero and you will enter a state of endless winter. And it's going to happen very quickly after the start of the game. If you approach it like a puzzle, you will have 3 major obstacles to overcome in this puzzle. Number 1 is the insane zombie population. Number 2 is loot scarcity, and also no power and no water from day 1. And finally, you will have to rely on your crafting skills and also some very basic food sourcing technologies, as all the food in the game, except the non-perishable food, is rotten on day 1, and most of the tools you will be able to find, if you find them, will likely be in a pretty poor condition. So you start the game, you decide to pick this scenario, you see this lovely idyllic video of a forest cabin and a character next to a fire pit, but it's not as easy as it seems. Your first major decision is your build. And I want to start by emphasizing that there are probably various different ways in which you can approach this challenge. I'm gonna share my strategy, which I found to be pretty effective and something that I feel comfortable playing with, but it's my playstyle. You guys might have a different playstyle. So what I would like you to do now is go into the comments section and tell me your builds. What are the must-have traits to beat this challenge and play a fairly comfortable game? But what is the build that I am using? Well, as you can see, it's a build that's tilted heavily towards wilderness survival. And before I explain the logic behind this, I should probably mention that I am using the More Traits mod, which adds all kinds of different traits, rebalances the skill points needed, which basically makes the character creation far more interesting, and I strongly recommend you guys use this mod because it does give a new layer to the game. So the way that I structured my build is I got the Outdoorsy to not be affected so much by the harsh weather conditions, I got the Wilderness Knowledge to be able to properly identify foods and plants, and I also got the Wildsman. I am also heavily built on maintenance because I will be using spears as my primary weapon of choice. That's why I do have the maintenance boost, and I also picked the DIY expert as the primary occupation because all of these give me a nice combination of bonuses to the maintenance skill, which you guys probably already know, it's super important. And a few more things to take into consideration. The ideal weight, this is to help me balance my weight, as weight management is something that's going to be a massive challenge later on in the game. And also I did pick Sewer and Angler because I think tailoring is an underrated trait, especially in this environment. It's quite useful to have. And the Angler because of the fishing bonuses. I wasn't very successful fishing, but we'll cover that later. As for the negative effects, I am taking both the motion sickness and the student driver because I'm not expecting to drive a lot, so I don't care about the negative impacts of these particular traits, and everything else is just there for me to be able to close this build and create a character. So the game starts and we are greeted with this lovely message saying in 3 days the endless winter begins, wrap up warm. The fact that it is 3 days before the snowstorm hits does imply a need for a certain strategic approach through the entire playthrough. Now, I'm gonna talk about the way that I approach it, how I break down the strategy for Winter is Coming later on in the video, but now I want to focus on the starting house. And I'm not gonna talk about looting every single thing that you might find useful in these conditions, like warm clothing, some basic weapons, maybe some non-perishable food, because these are no-brainers. I want to focus on the location and what you're expected to find near this location. The starting house for this challenge is exactly the same house you would start your CDDA run. That is, if you don't apply any kind of mods, because there are mods that change the location, but for pure vanilla playthrough, it's exactly the same location. So essentially, we are north of Muldrow. This area isn't known for any loot-rich locations, so you would be reduced to simply looting nearby houses and just relying purely on luck. And keep in mind, the zombie population in this game mode is set to insane, so expect a lot of opposition wherever you go. There is, however, one very specific place I always like to visit, and I make that my top priority whenever I start playing the Winter is Coming challenge, and that is a convenience store just south of the starting location. Now, in order to get to that store, you will likely need to fight your way through. Now, in this playthrough that I used to record this video, it took me a total of just over 200 zombies before I was comfortably able to loot the store, and that's because there is a nearby trailer park, there are large groups, so you need to plan this properly. Now, the benefit of fighting all those zombies is that you might find interesting items on them. Like in this example, I found heavy socks. And now let's just briefly talk about which are the items I prioritize, and I would suggest you prioritize as well when playing this game mode. The list is very simple and does contain just few basic items. The reason is you will likely need to carry them until you settle in a permanent location, so I would focus on getting some warm clothes, finding some sort of a source of fire, and also some basic tools. Now, for basic tools, for me that's a hatchet and a knife. And that's because if you have these two, you are basically able to supply yourself with unlimited supply of spears, and spears being incredibly overpowered, they are the perfect weapon to use when playing this mode. I also like to find some lightweight, high-calorie foods like chips, chocolate, anything containing sugar, and also basic cookware, because you might be put in a position in which you need to cook water. And this way, if you have a pot or a saucepan, you're covered. The reason I always prioritize the convenience store in that trailer park section of Muldrow is because it is likely to contain at least some, if not any, of the top priority items that I am looking for, and it is very close to where you start the game. Now, when Winter is Coming, there is one more thing I always do, which I don't do when I play regular Zomboid, and that is I always check all the trash cans, trash bins, and garbage bags. With the general scarcity of loot in this play mode, sometimes you're able to find that one specific item you're looking for just thrown away in one of these garbage bags, so it's very useful to check them whenever you find any. Once you reach the convenience store like I did in this example, you will see why it was worth all the effort. Now, I know some of the players tend to immediately just go north and try to live off the woods and the surroundings. They don't bother going into the town, but I strongly recommend first looting this store, because this place is just a treasure chest of useful things. Now, there is essentially so much loot that it's impossible to carry it, so you can either think about maybe basing here for a while, or if you're lucky, maybe find a vehicle. But finding a vehicle will completely change the way that you play Winter is Coming, because it will open up the entire map for you. Nonetheless, the store itself should be your primary go-to location. And now that we've managed to get here, I want to talk about how I approach the strategy for playing Winter is Coming. I like to break it down into 3 separate phases. The phase 1, which is essentially days 1 through day 3, is the pre-storm phase. Now here what I like to focus on is aggressive looting, getting into the convenience store, prioritizing all the necessary survival items that I will need, and this phase is characterized by very intense combat. And just so we're clear, to achieve everything on this list in 3 days is almost impossible. You would need to be insanely lucky to do so, but if you just focus on those top things, you are already well positioned for long-term playthrough. Phase 2 is the storm and the immediate post-storm phase. This is where you enter the permanent snow environment, and you are no longer expected to see temperatures above 0 degrees. Now, what I like to do in this phase is first identifying a permanent location that I will use as my permanent base, and also figure out which are the loot-rich areas in the vicinity of my permanent base in order to properly plan my actions. This is also what I like to focus on leveling my core skills like carving, carpentry, maintenance, foraging. All of these things will be essential to keep your character alive. And finally, phase 3, which I essentially just call staying alive. Now, your biggest problem will be maintaining your character's weight, simply because you do not have all the options available to you that you would normally have while playing regular Project Zomboid. Now, the best way to manage this, or at least that's my perspective, is first focusing on finding farm animals. Now, in the playthrough that I am showing you today in this video, I do have some farm animals, chickens, sheep and pigs. Preferably, I would also find a cow, but that's not such an easy thing to find. And also, potentially finding ways to do indoor farming. Now, indoor farming is a bit tricky because of the fact that you need to untick the setting in the sandbox options, which makes all the plants grown inside die, but you're not able to grow plants outside. If you've watched my farming video, which I am linking somewhere on the screen right now, you're not able to grow things outside in temperatures below 0 because temperatures below 0 will impact plants' health, gradually deteriorating all the way to the level in which the plant dies. And final thing to take into consideration in phase 3 is proper pacing. You want to mix up those high intensity days with rest days where you just focus on basic things. This will help you manage your weight better. Finally, after 3 full days, we start to see first snowflakes falling from the sky. Now imagine the shock. It's the 12th of July, like what is going on? And as a side note, you guys can probably see I've managed to dispose of 277 zombies in the first 3 days. That was all done only to get into the store. And I also was lucky enough to find an old van and a trailer full of pigs. So I really prioritized these things because I figured they will help me in long-term survival. It was definitely worth it. And the fact that I burned half of the trailer park, you know, there are just some collateral damage that sometimes need to take place, right? But this is also the moment in which you have to take a decision. What to do next, where to go for permanent shelter. Now I'm going to show you a map with some suggestions if you want to stay in the general area of Muldrow and stay essentially outside of the area most populated by zombies. These 3 locations are the remote farm, the forest cabin, and the drug lab. Each one offers different benefits to the player. Now I chose the remote farm because it's the largest and it's still fairly close to the general Muldrow area. And you're also guaranteed to find chickens and sheep, so that is a good start for your very own farm. You are, however, expected to face significant resistance while reaching the farm. Now I would expect at least 20, probably more likely up to 50 zombies in the general area of this farm. So 2 things to take into consideration. Don't go there at night for the first time, and don't go there tired or overloaded. You want to be as nimble and as effective in combat as possible, because it would really suck if you invest all that time and effort into getting all the necessary loot and moving to this farm only to die being overwhelmed by a horde over there. So plan ahead. Day 5 is when the real storm hits. Now the farmhouse I chose as my permanent settlement doesn't have one thing I really need in this particular game mode, and that is an old stove. Since the electricity is out, I don't have a generator, and God, I am not leveling up electrical to level 3. The easiest way to cook warm food and to provide heat for your house is to get an old stove, and luckily you are able to find an old stove in the forest cabin I shown you on the map previously, and that's where I'm going right now. It's a pretty long walk, but once you do that and bring that old stove into your permanent location, not only does it look nice and makes the whole place really cozy, but it also provides heat and acts as an oven, so you're able to cook warm food. Nothing better than warming your feet next to such a hot oven with your food being cooked there. But keep in mind one thing: if you put any kind of a food into this old stove, this light animation that shows the stove burning, it's just gone. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure if it's just me or is it some sort of a mod conflict, but it no longer glows that bright yellowish glow. If you reached this point, however, guys, you're already well set up for a long-term survival in winter is coming. But what to do next, what are the things that you should prioritize, and how to troubleshoot some of the issues you will likely face while playing it. Now, for most of the problems you'll face, there are usually two solutions. One is the hard way, which usually requires you to slash through hundreds of zombies and reaching a specific point on a map where you might find a solution to this issue, say missing tools for example. Or there is a more tedious but much safer method, which is basically surviving using your wilderness survival skills. So for missing tools, well, that's not a problem. If you combine things like foraging with napping and maintenance, a little carving, you are essentially able to make any kind of a tool required to build pretty much anything in the game. Now in this particular example I'm showing you, my car was stuck because the forest road was covered with trees and I needed to find a way to make my very own stone axe. Now if you know the crafting mechanics of Project Zomboid, you would know that if you find a sharp flint stone, you're able to make your very own axe, or alternatively, if you find a flint nodule, you can sharpen it and then make an axe. So I was essentially looking for a sharp flint flake in order to make an axe. Now, did I eventually find it? Of course I have. Did I find plenty of things in the meantime? Of course. Did it took me a lot of time? Probably yes, but I found a solution. And this can be applied to any kind of a problem you will face while playing Winter is Coming. Same thing applies for sourcing food. You will need to befriend things like trapping, fishing, potentially even hunting, also foraging. Especially if you're able to distinguish between edible and non-edible foods. This way you're able to secure a consistent, sustainable inflow of all kinds of different foods and nutrients required for your character to stay in shape. And if all of these skills are something you've never practiced in Project Zomboid and have no idea how they work, well, you see, I got you covered. I covered every single of them in separate episodes of the masterclass, so if you check out the playlist, you will find ways to effectively use each one of these skills for collecting food, equipment, supplies, anything you need for long-term survival. Now, I've been going for quite long on this particular game mode already, but that's because I really enjoy playing it, and if you've never tried it, I strongly recommend you do. It's such a fun way to play. It adds an extra level of difficulty and pushes you outside of your normal comfort zones, if you can say you have some comfort zones in Project Zomboid in the first place. Now, if Winter is Coming alone is not challenging enough for you, well, you can always do what I did in my recent livestream series, where I added the Eternauta mod on top of it, which made this entire experience extremely fun and even more painful, as visible on these two provided examples. But anyway, guys, I will be wrapping up. There is one more thing I forgot to mention, which is incredibly important, and that is that animals, at least for now, are not affected by weather effects. So it could be minus 500 outside and they would still act normally. What is the logic in that? Don't ask me, but if you're worried about your animals in Winter is Coming, there is no need to be worried about them. At least not until Indie Stone makes a change and makes the animals impacted by the weather. Before we go, just a few announcements. As usual, first a massive shout out to all the tier 3 members of the channel. Much appreciate all the support you guys are showing me. If you want to become a channel member, there are ways to do so. You'll find them, I'm sure of it. If you want to get in touch with me or the entire community, hop onto the Discord. There is over 100 of us and there is always something interesting happening, so you're more than welcome to join. And finally, if you reach this point, a massive thank you for watching the entire video. Let me know what you think about Winter is Coming. I'm really interested in your takes as always. If you're not subscribed to the channel but you like what I'm doing, there is a subscribe button somewhere. You can click it. I encourage you to do so. For today, that's everything, and as always, I'm Gertrix. Cheers, guys.